While putting the finishing touches on a future rock anthem, the record producer had a novel idea to add bagpipes to the track. Thinking that the band's frontman was a pipe player, he asked him to do the honors. The only problem was the singer didn't know how to play the bagpipes. This is a story of an improbable signature song for one of rock's greatest. And the crazy road he traveled led him to compose a mantra for all musicians to live by. The story is next on Professor of Rock. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you ever spent like 2 or 3 hours walking around Blockbuster Video trying to find the right movie to watch back in the day, you're gonna love this daily dollop of nostalgia. Every day we do it. Subscribe below right now. Make sure to click the bell so you never miss out. And also click up here for our new merch, including our new Vintage Years collection designs. We just added some new ones. So it's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll.
It's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll.
If you've ever been in a rock band, truer words have never been spoken. The phrase became an autobiography of perseverance and the signature song for Ronald Belford Scott, better known by his stage name, Bon Scott, the great Bon Scott. Bon was a man who wanted to rock and roll with every fiber of his being, no matter how long it took to get there. As a teenager, Bon had brushes with the law that landed him a 9-month penance at the Riverbank Juvenile Institution. Before he entered the working class, Bon attempted to join the Australian Army, but he was rejected for being socially maladjusted. Bon Scott took whatever job he could find just to make enough money to get by, because what he really wanted to do was rock and roll. He was a postman, a bartender, and a truck packer before he started his band The Spectres in 1964 as the drummer and sometimes lead singer. In '66, The Spectres merged with another local group named The Winstons. Now, The Winstons fizzled, and Bon put together his next band called The Valentines. This is where he was a co-lead vocalist with Vince Lovegrove. It's hard to imagine Bon Scott in a bubble-gum pop band, but that's what The Valentines were. Bon and his bandmates wore wide-collared shirts, bell-bottoms. Looking more like Herman's Hermits than anything, in playing songs with titles like Knick Knack Paddywhack.
Oh man, he played four. Now here I am knocking on your...
After the merciful demise of the Valentines, Bon Scott segued to a country blues outfit called Fraternity. Fraternity actually became a pretty hot band in the clubs of Sydney and Melbourne. So the guys decided to move to London in an effort to build an audience in Europe in 1972. When the group settled in London, there were 18 people residing in the same small house. This included wives, children, and pets. It was a kind of communal existence they lived in Australia, except there was no money coming in at all. And London was a much more expensive place to live than was Sydney. The music scene in London had changed dramatically at that point by the time Fraternity arrived. It was all about glam rock, and Fraternity couldn't get arrested. The band was deeply despondent over the lack of interest. Trying desperately to generate a spark, the band changed their name to Fang, and they landed some gigs opening for other London-based bands. And one of those gigs, Fang was on a bill that included the group Geordie. Now, Bon was very impressed with Geordie's lead singer. There's a chap by the name of Brian Johnson. You might recall in an earlier POR feature on AC DC that Angus claimed after Bon joined AC DC, he once told him, if anything should happen to him, that Brian is your man. After the failure of the London experiment, Fraternity, Fang split up, and Bon moved back to Australia. Bon hacked around Sydney looking for the next opportunity to rock and roll. He took a utility job with the booking agency that his wife Irene worked at, doing whatever they needed him to do for like $10 a day. So his main responsibility at the agency was being a chauffeur for the artists that the agency represented, driving them about town for, like I said, $10 a night. Bond's life took a career-changing turn when he met AC DC in September of 1974. AC DC was part of a tour package with Lou Reed and Stevie Wright, and on that fateful night, they were playing their own show at the Puraka Hotel. Imagine this scene. AC DC didn't have a singer that night. They were just playing instrumental versions of rock standards. Bond and his wife were in the audience at the Puraka with his former Valentine's cohort, Vince Lovelace. And Vince kept, prodding Bond to get on stage with that band. Finally, Bond jumped on the stage, he grabbed a mic, and he started, he began to wail with Malcolm and Angus Young. After an official audition that was arranged by the eldest Young brother, George, Bond was hired to replace Dave Evans as the lead vocalist for AC/DC. Bond and the Youngs were all sons of Scotland, so there was an instant bond between the Youngs and their new frontman. Not only was it the dawn of a new era for Bon Scott, but it also marked the beginning of the AC/DC that we all know and love. This episode is sponsored by Zenni Eyewear. Zenni specializes in helping you get the perfect pair of eyewear. First with the right frame size, which makes fit and comfort easy, and they recommend the best lenses based on your prescription. It's pretty amazing. You just make your selection, you put in your prescription, and choose your favorite features like blue blocks or anti-fog, anti-glare, and they deliver them right to your door. You got to check it out at zenni.com. So it was Bond who brought what Malcolm Young called the stick-it-to-him attitude that the rest of the band had inside them. They just needed Bond to liberate it. AC/DC's debut album with Bon Scott as the frontman and primary lyricist was High Voltage, first released only in Australia. That was in February of 1975. High Voltage, that was a big success in Oz, and it set the stage for one of AC/DC's seminal albums, TNT, a harder edge rocker that came out once again as an Aussie-only release December of 75. Now, TNT included some of the most beloved early material from AC/DC, including the anthemic It's a Long Way to the Top If You Want to Rock and Roll. The track was a retracing of Bond's personal journey while chasing his rock and roll dream. When Bond began writing It's a Long Way to the Top, AC/DC were still playing seedy venues. It wasn't a song about drinking or chasing women. It was a deglamorized introspection about the real challenges that a musician faces to be in a band, to try to make it. Make it all the way. It's a long way to the top. That connects with every musician, who's ever lugged around a drum kit or been sleep deprived from white knuckle races to gig after gig, making little or no money in the process. That song chronicles what actually happened to Bond during his rock and roll travels. He was robbed, he was assaulted, stoned, and cheated by greedy agents. The point of Bond's song is that a true rocker doesn't care about any of that. You accept the hardships, you work your butt off, and you roll with the punches. That is, if you really want to rock and roll, which he did. It's a Long Way to the Top is not a typical AC/DC track. It's quite unique for its openness, with each band member having the space to inject valuable, robust dynamics. Phil Rudd on drums, Mark Evans on bass, and Malcolm Young's relentless rhythm guitar licks. But the most distinguishing feature of It's a Long Way to the Top is, of course, the ingenious placement of bagpipes. It was big brother George Young that came up with the brainstorm, to add bagpipes to the nearly finished track. It wasn't the first time that a rock record had used bagpipes, but it was a pretty novel concept. I believe the first rock record with bagpipes was Sky Pilot by Eric Burdon and the Animals. That was in '68. Now, George, who co-produced the TNT album with his partner Harry Vanda, he remembered that Bon was in a pipe band when he was a teenager. So he asked Bon to bust out the bagpipes for this track. Now, what George didn't realize was that Bon was not a bagpipe player. Bon knew how to play the flute and the drums, but not the pipes. Bon excitedly agreed to do it, though, but he neglected to tell George that he didn't know how to play them. Anyway, he quickly got a hold of some bagpipes, and he took a crash course on how to play. You know, just like a Jedi using the Force, if you want to rock and roll, there is no can. There's only do or do not.
Do or do not. There is no try.
Bon approached the task of playing the pipes like he did everything else, with crazy self-confidence. The bagpipe refrain that he performed on It's a Long Way to the Top with the help of tape loops, it became a riveting classic, even though he played it in the wrong key, apparently. Now, the call and response between Bon's bagpipes and Angus's lead guitar in the middle section of It's a Long Way to the Top is definitely a high point of the track. Incredible. There is further interplay between the pipes and the guitar during Angus's solo, which many regard as one of his top 5 solos. The pipes proved to be far too challenging to pull off live, though. It was basically scrapped after 30 concerts or so. To match the droning keys of the pipes, Angus and Malcolm had to constantly tune their guitars, which was a major pain. Even Bon, grew tired of the hassle, so for their live shows, the band swapped the pipes for an extended Angus guitar solo. The last time AC DC played the bagpipes, and they were played by Bon, was at St. Albans, Victoria, Australia. After performing the song, Bon sat the pipes down in the corner of the stage, and they were destroyed by fans who pounced on him like a pack of wild dogs. The original music video for It's a Long Way to the Top, that shows the band playing in the back of a flatbed truck rolling down Swanston Street in Melbourne. The clip also features the players from the Rats of Tobruk pipe band, including Kevin Conlon, who got the call from Bon Scott about appearing in that video. Such a classic video. You got to check it out on YouTube. I'll try to link to it. Conlon did not know Bon, and Bon didn't really know him, except that he was a piper. So Conlon recalled that Bon wanted to buy a set of bagpipes and have a few lessons. Conlon told Bon that it would cost over $1,000 and would take about 12 months or more of lessons to learn to play. Because Bon was only going to be miming for that video, the two settled on a couple of lessons so that Bon would look the part. It's a Long Way to the Top, If You Want to Rock and Roll, has been remade by everybody from Motorhead to Lucinda Williams, Pat Boone, if you can believe that.
It's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll.
To Jack Black. Of course, in the movie School of Rock, Jack and the kids gave a rousing rendition of the anthem at the very end there. But the song will always be on a pedestal for Bon Scott, illustrating the guts and the glory of the quest for rock and roll greatness. Sadly, Bon Scott died just shy of his 34th birthday. When AC DC was on the verge of a phenomenal explosion that Bod would sadly not be a part of, at least not in the flesh. The spirit of Bon Scott lives on with the legacy of AC DC, epitomized by his opus. It's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll. Out of deep respect for his fallen predecessor, Brian Johnson elected not to perform the song at AC/DC concerts for more than 20 years. Johnson picked up the torch when Bon died, of course, in 1980 and teamed with Angus, Malcolm, and Phil Rudd to carry on his legacy. AC/DC stayed on that onerous path to reach the top, to become one of the all-time biggest bands in rock and roll history. Bon Scott, who was posthumously rated #1 on the list of the 100 greatest frontmen of all time by Classic Rock magazine in 2004, he's undoubtedly in rock and roll heaven, looking down on his brothers with I'm sure, a mischievous smile and busting with pride as, after all these years, with all the changes in music, bands splitting up, new genres, new artists, AC/DC still at the top of the game in rock and roll.
To the top if you want to rock and roll.
Leave us a comment about the great Bon Scott and AC/DC and this powerful, truly powerful rock anthem. What are your memories of this iconic song? Let us know in the comments. We'll have a good discussion. If you like this episode, be sure to check out our other videos on AC/DC. Also, don't forget to subscribe below so that you never miss out on our videos. Check out our Patreon for even more content. And make sure to look at our new merch, including our latest additions to the Vintage Years collection. We have the years 1967, 1981, and 1991. You voted on them. Just check it out at ProfessorRock.com or up here. Help us keep the music alive. Till next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends. Talk to you soon.